Izumi is the idiotic definition of the unluckiest boyfriend alive. Like, this idiot can't go 5 minutes without tripping over thin air, getting hit by a stray ball, and even his clothes would strangle him to the afterlife if they get their chance. But in his dark, grim world, he's blessed with Shikimori, a pink Barbie princess, who apparently is not just a cutie. Let's find out what she is, shall we? The episode starts with Izumi, the human embodiment of disaster, heading to school for the first day. His mom fixes his hair while giving him an extensive warning list of things to look out for. Rocks, crows, cars, and the wrath of whatever deity cursed him with this much bad luck. 7 seconds after leaving home, before brother can even scream for his mommy, he trips on a rock and faceplants into the ground like an axe. Nature sends a crow to drop a special blessing on him. He dodged that bullet, but that was just a decoy. He tripped over a cable, and all the hard work his mama did on his hair went to otter waste. And honestly, at this point, even a sloth would outrun him to school. Meanwhile, Shikimori, the walking goddess with pink hair so shiny it probably blinds birds mid-flight, is waiting for her walking disaster boyfriend. She's sparkling like she's the lead character in a romance anime. Oh wait, she is. Impatiently tapping her foot, she spots Izumi running toward her, looking like he's been through a WWE cage match. Turns out he stopped to help an old lady who pointed out his disheveled hair. Bless his heart, but let's not pretend he's not a walking disaster. On their way to school, Shikimori instantly notices Izumi's rough morning because, well, it's written all over his lopsided existence. He brushes it off, saying he's used to it, but come on, no one should ever be used to this level of chaotic existence. He can't take his eyes off the wonder he's walking next to, and he thinks about how adorable Shikimori is. This dude hit a jackpot, and we're all left wondering how this lucky fool managed to land her. His thoughts about her cuteness are interrupted when she saves him from being hit by a truck like a literal superhero. Is she secretly part of the Avengers? At school, Izumi's nerves are all over the place. He desperately wants to be in the same class as Shikimori, because, let's be real, she's his only safety net against the universe's beef with him. To his relief, they're in the same class, along with a few familiar faces, but Izumi's curse is relentless. During class, his bad luck strikes again, this time spilling dust onto Shikimori. This sends her running to the bathroom, leaving Izumi to fend for himself against the jealous pack of hyenas. I mean his other classmates who are also as jealous as me. I can't land a 10 and this guy with extreme bad luck lands an 11? It's not fair. They taunt him mercilessly, questioning how someone as painfully average as him snagged Shikimori. Honestly, the same. The roasting session ends abruptly when Shikimori returns, casually rescues Izumi, and shuts the mob up with a death glare so intense it could shatter diamonds. After school, Inuzuka, Izumi's friend, suggests they all hang out and everyone agrees. The group heads to a bowling alley, and it quickly turns into a competition. Inuzuka and Nekozaki are on fire, throwing strikes like they're auditioning for a sports tournament. Even Hachimitsu, the quiet one, surprises everyone with a perfect strike. Then it's Shikimori's turn. She obliterates the competition, landing strike after strike, like she's a professional bowler who guises as an assassin. Inuzuka and Nekozaki are left in shambles, their confidence smashed into smithereens. Izumi, meanwhile, looks at her like she's just unlocked Super Saiyan Blue, complete with sparkles in his eyes. If admiration was an Olympic sport, he'd take gold. The walk home is quieter, but not without its emotional moments. Izumi, as insecure as a potato, confesses that he feels pathetic because Shikimori is always saving him. She reassures him in the sweetest way, saying she protects him because she wants to, just like Mikasa's undying devotion to Eren, minus the terrifying obsession and scarf worship. Izumi feels better, and the two end their day chatting like the wholesome duo they are, dreaming of becoming as iconic as Itadori and Aoi from Jujutsu Kaisen. In episode 2, the class was buzzing with excitement for the ball sports tournament. Izumi, the world's most unlucky noodle, and his buddy Inuzuka were signed up for the boys' soccer match. Meanwhile, Shikimori, the goddess of perfection, and Nekozaki, her hyper sidekick, were set for the volleyball tournament. Izumi, knowing his luck was about as reliable as a wet paper bag, decided he'd just focus on cheering for Shikimori. But life decided to smack him with a curveball. His match was at the same time as hers. The tournament kicked off starting with the boys' soccer game. Almost immediately, Izumi's curse took center stage. Not even 5 minutes in, he somehow managed to trip, twist his ankle, and collide with another player. While he lay there like a broken action figure, Shikimori swooped in like a knight in shining armor to help him up to the clinic. She looked genuinely worried. In the clinic, Shikimori asked Izumi 100 times if he was okay. Izumi, of course, was physically fine, but his pride had taken a nosedive into the dirt. Before leaving for her volleyball game, Shikimori teased him, saying maybe she should just hide under the covers and stay with him. Izumi turned beet red like a tomato with limbs, while Shikimori laughed and left, clearly still having fun at his expense. Meanwhile, over at the volleyball court, the match was about to start. Shikimori arrived just in time, radiating an energy that screamed, "I'm about to dominate." Initially, things looked grim as the other team gained the upper hand. But when Izumi finally limped into the stands to cheer for her, Shikimori flipped the switch. She went full serious mode, smashing spikes like she was in a blue lock showdown. The other team didn't stand a chance. With Shikimori leading the charge, her team clinched victory with a 2-point lead. The next day, Shikimori and Nekozaki were the talk of the school. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of Shikimori. She was now the undisputed queen of cool, and poor Izumi was nothing more than a footnote in her shadow. Girls lined up to take selfies with Shikimori, shake her hand, or just bask in her glow. Izumi, meanwhile, was stuck eating lunch alone, staring at his rice like it was his only friend. It was like Shikimori had become the Yagami light of the school, and everyone else was her loyal Kira cult. Even Nekozaki, who usually spent her time cracking jokes, was caught up in the life of popularity. After school, as Izumi trudged home, he mulled over how exhausting the day had been. He missed spending time with Shikimori and hated that he now had to share her coolness with everyone else. Lost in thought, he didn't notice the stairs in front of him. Predictably, his foot slipped, and he was seconds away from eating concrete when Shikimori appeared out of nowhere, catching him mid-fall like some superhero. She scolded him for trying to go home without her, looking every bit the protective partner. Izumi confessed how he felt about her sudden popularity, explaining how he missed the moments when it was just the two of them. Shikimori's face softened, and she reassured him that he was the only one she cared about walking home with. Sure, it was sweet, but Izumi still had to deal with sharing it during the day. They headed home together, looking like the perfect couple. Inuzuka showed up with 2 premium tickets he got from a coworker. Since he had plans and couldn't use them, he handed both to Izumi, our human magnet for disasters. Izumi's first thought was to invite Shikimori. Shikimori, of course, said yes immediately. That night, Izumi stayed up devising strategies to dodge his bad luck. You'd think he was plotting a heist. Meanwhile, Shikimori was busy planning how to look cute, not that she needed much effort. The next morning, Izumi left the house ridiculously early to, in quote, burn off his bad luck. Surprisingly, it worked. He managed to meet Shikimori without getting hit by a truck or chased by a dog, or just causing the world to end. Shikimori, as usual, looked flawless, while Izumi resembled a damp towel trying to hold itself together. On the ride to the cinema, Izumi daydreamed about their first movie date being perfect, maybe even sneaking in a lip-to-lip sesh. At the theater, picking a movie turned into a mini-war. Izumi, desperate to look agreeable, let Shikimori choose. She picked a trending horror flick. Izumi tried to act tough, thinking this was his chance to show off his manliness, like Gon braving Hisoka's creepy stares. Once the movie started, it was game over for Izumi. The film was scarier than he could handle. He was clutching Shikimori like she was his emotional support plushie. If anyone in the theater had looked over, they'd have thought he was auditioning to replace Zenitsu from Demon Slayer. Meanwhile, Shikimori remained cool and calm, consoling her pathetic little boyfriend with the grace of a saint. After the movie, they decided to grab something to eat, but, of course, Izumi discovered he had lost his wallet. This guy couldn't hold on to a wallet if it were glued to his hand. Just when the date was about to hit rock bottom, Izumi's parents magically appeared. His mom, clearly an MVP, invited them back home for a feast. At Izumi's house, his mom whipped up a meal that could have fed a small army. She fussed over Shikimori, showering her with compliments and making sure she felt at home. She even told Shikimori she could drop by any time. Poor Izumi, meanwhile, just sat there looking like an awkward extra in his own life. After dinner, Izumi's parents conveniently disappeared, leaving Shikimori and Izumi alone. Izumi, true to form, confessed how nervous he had been about her coming over. Shikimori admitted she was just as nervous, proving that even perfection has its moments. To top it off, Shikimori helped with the dishes and bonded with Izumi's mom. The two even giggled about how Izumi looked like a baby panda when he fell asleep at the table. During their heart-to-heart, Izumi's mom turned serious for a moment and asked Shikimori to be patient with Izumi, considering his tendency to trip over air. Shikimori, however, was solid. She reassured his mom that she wasn't going anywhere. When it got late, Izumi's mom woke him up to walk Shikimori home. Still groggy, he realized Shikimori had somehow bonded with his dad too. On the walk home, Izumi felt embarrassed about falling asleep, but Shikimori found it adorable. It was summer, and the sun felt like it had moved into everyone's backyard. Izumi and his gang were planning their summer break, and Neko suggested the beach. Shikimori loved the idea, but Inuzuka, the group's unofficial mom, suggested the river instead. He figured Izumi, the walking unlucky charm, couldn't handle the sun without turning into a sad tomato. Everyone agreed, and the river it was. A few days later, they learned final exams were around the corner, which killed the vibe. To cheer up, they went to the mall to prepare for the trip. Inuzuka, ever the nerdy nag, kept whining about studying. Meanwhile, Neko and Hachimitsu dashed off to find swimsuits. Shikimori, ever the loyal queen of cool, asked Izumi if he planned to swim. Of course he said no because he probably feared drowning in an inch of water. Disappointed, she decided not to get a swimsuit either. That was until she caught Izumi staring at a poster of a swimsuit model. This guy couldn't hold back his clueless face if his life depended on it. Shikimori's competitive spirit lit up like a shonen protagonist powering up. She sprinted to the swimsuit store, determined to look more stunning than any model. She bumped into Neko and Hachimitsu, who laughed as she spilled her jealous frustration. Neko teased her about how obvious it was that Shikimori hated losing, something everyone but Shikimori seemed to know. They all teamed up to pick the most jaw-dropping swimsuit, like crafting a magical girl transformation outfit. Meanwhile, Izumi and Inuzuka were eating and pretending to study, though Inuzuka kept cracking jokes about cramming like nerds before an exam. When the girls showed up, Izumi immediately noticed Shikimori had bought something, but because he's as sharp as a spoon, he didn't realize it was a swimsuit. He kept asking, and Shikimori denied it like a guilty thief caught red-handed. On the way home, Izumi shared one of his endless stories about his bad luck. This one was particularly pathetic, and he ended up looking gloomier than Luffy without meat. Back home, Izumi started panicking about the exams because, unsurprisingly, he had done zero actual studying. Sigh. That's just like me. As he spiraled, Shikimori called him. Her voice was like a cheat code for his anxiety, instantly calming him down. They started talking about stars, and Izumi admitted he'd never seen constellations. Shikimori promised to take him somewhere special to see them. Izumi, trying to sound cool, promised to take her somewhere too, but Shikimori shut that down, saying she didn't care where they went as long as it was together. After an hour of chatting, Shikimori ended the call, saying it was late. On her end, she was so flustered by Izumi's words that she ended up screaming into her pillow, like Goku charging for a fight. All this cuteness, and you can't still find a girl. And you single Pringle. Now go into the comments and tell me why. Maybe you could be as lucky as this cow. Exams were finally over, and school break had arrived. Izumi and his group of misfit friends headed to the river as planned. Neko and Inuzuka wasted no time diving into the fun, while the others tried to catch up. They decided to prepare a barbecue, but chaos wasn't far off. Inuzuka, with his clumsy hands, was more useless than paper in a sword fight, so he got benched. To everyone's shock, Izumi, the unmatched coward of the group, grabbed the knife and began chopping vegetables like a 5-star chef. It was almost magical, like Soma from Food Wars had possessed him. Nobody knew this walking disaster had such a hidden talent. With Nico and Hachimitsu in charge of the grill, the barbecue was underway. Meanwhile, Shikimori was up to something on her own. Izumi noticed but said nothing. Soon, she brought over her creation and offered it to him. Izumi took one bite and instantly regretted his life choices. The food was so bad it could have been used as a bioweapon. Turns out, Shikimori wasn't perfect at everything. She was like Asuna from Sword Art Online on one of her off days in the kitchen. But because Izumi was a certified simp, he kept eating, pretending it was delicious. Shikimori, looking as determined as Urza Scarlet, vowed to improve her cooking. Izumi whipped up some s'mores as dessert, redeeming the meal. Everyone ate, packed up, and headed to the river for some water fun. The vibe was great until disaster struck. A girl playing nearby got swept away by the current. Without hesitation, Izumi jumped in like a wannabe hero. He managed to save her, but true to his bad luck, his legs cramped. The river swept him away like a piece of trash on a windy day. Inuzuka, with his limited brain power, finally noticed Izumi was missing. He shouted to the group, and they began searching. Soon, they found the girl Izumi had saved. She pointed to where he had drifted, and before anyone could act, Shikimori dove in. She swam like a mermaid on a mission and caught up to Izumi just in time. Dragging him to safety, she scolded him for being reckless. Meanwhile, the others stared, relieved that Izumi had once again cheated death. The girl's mother came over, showering Izumi with thanks. The girl even kissed his cheek, which sent Shikimori into jealous rage mode. After everything calmed down, the group returned to having fun. Once their river adventures were done, they headed to the mall for some shopping. As expected, Neko and Hachimitsu found the most ridiculous items, while Inuzuka complained about everything. They wrapped up their day with ice cream. Izumi and Shikimori got theirs first and stood to the side, enjoying the peaceful moment. Evening arrived quickly, and the group made their way to the train station. The place was eerily empty, so they sat down, giggling about the day. Once on the train, exhaustion hit everyone. Neko passed out first, followed by Hachimitsu, who somehow managed to look both adorable and terrifying in her sleep. Inuzuka snored so loudly, he sounded like a broken lawnmower. Izumi stayed awake for a while, watching Shikimori nap on his shoulder. For a guy with the worst luck in the world, this felt like a win. Eventually, he drifted off too. Shikimori woke up shortly after, noticing Izumi was out cold. She let him rest his head on her shoulder, a rare, tender moment for the chaotic couple. Izumi, the unmatched coward with skin as delicate as wet tissue paper, ended up with sunburns after their river outing. He looked like a boiled lobster on his call with Shikimori, who told him they'd have to postpone any more trips until his skin stopped screaming. But then, Izumi's eyes caught a news broadcast about a fireworks festival that night. In a burst of bravery that surprised no one, because we all know he simps harder than the Simpsons, he asked Shikimori to go with him. She agreed, probably out of pity. The big day arrived, and chaos began. Izumi fumbled around like a clueless duckling trying to get ready. His parents, clearly tired of his incompetence, stepped in to help. On the other hand, Shikimori's brother helped her out, though he probably wondered how his flawless sister could be like such a disaster for a boy. Izumi got to the festival first, looking like an awkward penguin, nervously making sure everything was perfect. When Shikimori arrived, they both froze, stunned by how adorable they looked. Izumi probably thought he was charming, but next to Shikimori, he resembled a wilted cabbage. They began exploring the festival, and everything seemed fine until they stumbled upon a shooting game stall. Izumi decided to try and win a stuffed wolf for Shikimori, but his aim was as bad as his luck. The stall owner was practically laughing at him. Shikimori stepped in, grabbed the gun, and shot down almost every prize like a sniper on a mission. She handed Izumi the stuffed wolf he wanted, rubbing salt into his wounds by saying she won it just for him. Izumi stood there, looking defeated as if his masculinity had just been packed up and shipped off. As they were leaving, the gang of weirdos arrived, led by Inuzuka, the walking noise machine. They decided to try goldfish scooping. Izumi failed miserably in the first round, splashing water everywhere like a clumsy toddler. Shikimori's competitive spirit flared up and she refused to stop until she won. It got so intense that Hachimitsu had to drag Shikimori away before they missed the fireworks. Shikimori and Izumi hurried off, but disaster struck again. Shikimori's slipper strap tore, leaving her limping like a wounded hero in an RPG. After walking a bit, her feet were bruised and she couldn't go any farther. They stopped to rest, and Shikimori asked Izumi about the secret spot he'd mentioned earlier. Izumi, being the noble idiot he was, refused and insisted on taking her to the regular viewing area. But then he did something surprising. He gave her a piggyback ride. Shikimori, touched but also probably questioning his stamina, noticed they weren't heading to the regular spot. That's when Izumi revealed he was taking her to the secret spot after all. They climbed a ridiculous amount of stairs, with Izumi huffing like an old man, until they reached the top. The secret spot was empty, and they had it all to themselves. They sat on a bench, talking and enjoying the fireworks. The fireworks lit up the sky, and they talked about everything, ignoring how chaotic their day had been. When the show ended, Izumi offered Shikimori another piggyback ride to get her down the stairs, but his noodle arms and weak legs gave out almost instantly. On the first step, he slipped, and they both went tumbling down. Luckily, Izumi's parents appeared out of nowhere, like overprotective ninjas who'd been stalking them all evening. They helped the clumsy duo down the stairs and drove them home, undoubtedly wondering how their son managed to survive each day without spontaneously combusting. Summer had ended, and Izumi, the walking disaster magnet, was back at school. The cultural festival was around the corner, and everyone was scrambling to prepare. Izumi got stuck with costume duty, while Shikimori was in charge of decorations. Of course, they weren't in the same group this time, probably because someone finally realized how much Izumi relied on Shikimori saving him from his own clumsiness. The next day, they handed Izumi a number tag at the gate. A seemingly simple task, but knowing Izumi, it could have gone horribly wrong. He rushed inside, eager to get to work. His class had decided to run an animal cafe, which sounded cute until you realized Izumi's involvement. While serving orders, he managed to slip on a napkin, like the unmatched cow he was. Plates almost flew everywhere, but Shikimori swooped in like a superhero to save his sorry self. Honestly, without her, he'd be a one-man demolition crew. By the end of the day, they sorted out shifts for the next day and headed home. Izumi probably spent the night double-checking his steps to avoid more embarrassing incidents. The next morning, Izumi dragged himself to a 3-hour library shift. He expected peace and quiet, but was greeted by Kamiya, a girl he knew from before. Kamiya was calm, friendly, and, most importantly, not a walking disaster like him. They started talking, and Kamiya admitted her class was also running a cafe, though she enjoyed the library's calmness. Izumi nodded along, grateful for the quiet. Then Kamiya, the sneaky interrogator, shifted the conversation. She mentioned Izumi seemed different and blamed it on him having a girlfriend. Before he could stutter out a reply, Kamiya was pressing him against a bookshelf with her questions. This wasn't some innocent chat. This was an interrogation worthy of a detective drama. Outside, students were running around matching number tags for a couples game organized by the student council. This chaotic game was eerily similar to how Izumi and Shikimori met last year. Back in the library, Izumi tried to keep up with Kamiya's relentless questions. Eventually, things calmed down, and Izumi, the sentimental softie, started telling Kamiya the story of how he met Shikimori. He went on and on about how she inspired him and gave him confidence. Kamiya listened, probably trying not to laugh at how hopeless he sounded. By the end of it, she looked touched, while Izumi looked like he wanted to melt into the floor from oversharing. Meanwhile, Shikimori and her friends were outside, searching for Izumi's number tag match. Little did they know, Izumi was having a weird heart-to-heart inside the library. Shikimori, the radiant queen, would have stormed in and dragged him out if she had any idea what was happening. Izumi nodded along, looking like a deer caught in headlights, probably imagining himself tripping over those dresses if he ever wore one. Then Neko, Kamiya's nosy friend, dragged her outside. There, Shikimori pulled a sneaky move, asking Kamiya to swap number tags so she could end up with Izumi. Kamiya agreed, smiling sweetly, probably plotting her revenge later. Izumi appeared just in time to act confused, as always. When he saw Shikimori, he looked like a scared hamster. Shikimori claimed she was checking on him early, though her smirk said otherwise. Kamiya suggested Izumi could leave, but he insisted on staying. Of course, he just wanted to soak in Kamiya's calm aura. After the library shift, Kamiya went back to her class's cafe but couldn't focus. She needed fresh air, not because of the festival's heat, but because her brain was a whirlwind of unspoken feelings for Izumi. Outside, Shikimori returned the number tag to Kamiya, admitting she shouldn't have taken it. Kamiya, being graceful as always, didn't slap her with it, even though she probably wanted to. Instead, she asked why Shikimori would give it back. Knowing how she felt about Izumi, Shikimori, in her usual confident way, said she didn't see Kamiya as a threat. Kamiya was touched by her kindness, or maybe just impressed that Shikimori didn't call her out for liking a walking disaster like Izumi. Kamiya confessed she had no plans to tell Izumi about her feelings, which was a relief because honestly, Izumi doesn't need more drama. Shikimori gave her a hug. They bonded over their shared feelings and walked off looking like a Hallmark movie poster. The next day was the festival's final showdown and Shikimori's birthday. Izumi, somehow still standing despite his tendency to trip over nothing, spent the day juggling festival duties and planning a surprise. After a busy day, they left for Iwasur for home, but Izumi, being sneaky for once, led Shikimori to the park. There, he gave her a necklace, managing not to drop it or tie it in a knot, which was honestly a miracle. He put it around her neck with shaky hands and a sappy smile, promising to get stronger for her. She smiled because, disaster or not, he was her disaster. Izumi was sick. He missed school, which was probably the first time anyone was glad to see him gone. Of course, Inuzuka, the loyal little puppy, decided to be the hero of the day and volunteered to bring Izumi's notes. Shikimori, not impressed with the idea, watched this unfold like a cat watching a mouse walk into a trap. Inuzuka was the kind of person who would help anyone, even if it meant catching Izumi's germs for fun. After school, Shikimori, probably wanting to make sure Inuzuka didn't get any weird ideas about her boyfriend, dragged him to Izumi's house. Neko, with her nose for drama, immediately sensed something was off and asked Hachimitsu to tag along. They all ended up on a weird little mission to get throat drops for Izumi, because clearly a sick Izumi was a national emergency. As they walked, Shikimori stopped at the store to buy throat drops. Of course, she somehow managed to call Inuzuka by her brother's name, which was a great way to make things awkward. Inuzuka froze like a deer in headlights. It was a moment so uncomfortable, even the throat drops might have been embarrassed. Enter Detective Hachimitsu, who immediately started solving the mystery like she had a PhD in teenage drama. Apparently, Shikimori saw some similarities between Inuzuka and her brother. Inuzuka was looking even more confused now, probably wondering if she had stepped into some weird family dynamic. But at least Shikimori admitted it. It was a moment of awkwardness that could only be topped by Izumi's usual antics, but it helped Inuzuka feel less like a confused bystander in this odd, clumsy love triangle. The next day, Hachimitsu was sick, which meant no one could depend on her for solving problems. Inuzuka was busy at work, so Shikimori and Neko were stuck together. Naturally, Neko started worrying about the upcoming athletic festival, probably because she knew Izumi would trip over his own feet and make a fool of everyone, but that's just how he rolled. Neko's overthinking was only interrupted when she spotted Kamiya in the mall, alone, and probably trying to avoid trouble. Of course, Neko, with her usual lack of filter, invited Kamiya to join them. Kamiya, like a sheep to the slaughter, happily accepted. The three of them wandered around the mall, playing with cute items, and, of course, visiting a pet store, because who could resist those fluffy creatures that had more personality than half the characters in this story? While Neko was off in the restroom, Shikimori and Kamiya, in an unexpected twist, started bonding. Shikimori was probably in shock because Kamiya was actually a fun person to hang out with. They played games, laughed, and got along surprisingly well. Kamiya's smile, which was rarer than a unicorn in the wild, was enough to melt even Shikimori's usually unflappable demeanor. After they left the mall, they stumbled upon an empty basketball court, but plot twist, it was already claimed by a group of girls who clearly thought they owned the place. After some friendly banter, Shikimori and Kamiya, probably out of boredom and a healthy amount of competitive spirit, decided to take on the girls in a game. They played, they won, and then, of course, took pictures with the girls like they were part of some cheesy sports movie. Kamiya, who was probably still buzzing from her surprise athletic skills, looked like she was having a moment of pure joy. When it was time to go home, Kamiya and Neko walked back together. Neko, feeling unusually soft, asked Kamiya about her interests. She respected Kamiya's boundaries, which was shocking because Neko usually bulldozed through everyone's personal space. Autumn arrived like a slap in the face and the cultural festival was over. Izumi and his classmates were now in the middle of preparing for the athletic festival. The first event was picking candidates for the mixed relay, and of course, Izumi got picked first. He probably looked like a scared hamster at that point, knowing how much of a disaster he would be. Then Hachimitsu was picked next, which made both of them feel like they were doomed from the start. But then, like a miracle, Shikimori swapped papers with someone and just like that, she was on the team. Honestly, at this point, everyone could just throw their hands up because it was clear who was going to carry the team. Inuzuka and Neko also volunteered to join. And just like that, the five of them were stuck together. Later, the team went to practice at the track, and surprise, surprise, Izumi and Hachimitsu were absolutely horrible. Izumi probably tripped over his own shadow, and Hachimitsu was running like she was dragging an anchor behind her. Meanwhile, Shikimori, Neko, and Inuzuka were doing everything like they were in an Olympic training camp. It was embarrassing to watch. As it got darker, Inuzuka, Neko, and Shikimori went off to practice for their other events, while Izumi and Hachimitsu stayed behind to practice. They both needed it badly, considering how much they sucked. The next day was the athletic festival. It started with the guys' horse battle, and no one was surprised when Izumi and Inuzuka got absolutely wrecked. They both looked like a pair of newborn calves trying to walk. Next up was the girls' ball toss, and Hachimitsu actually started off strong. She was in the lead, but like a typical overachiever, she burned out too quickly. She ended up second, looking like she'd been run over by a truck. But to her credit, even though she was tired, dirty, and sweaty, she was smiling. Because, she was around her friends, and that made everything magically better. Whatever helps her sleep at night. Then came the relay. The runners lined up, and the race began. Neko had a solid start, handing the baton to Hachimitsu, who looked like she was running on fumes. She kept up for a bit, but then, surprise, surprise, she started fading. She was probably thinking about how much she'd rather be anywhere but running right now. Then, the inevitable happened. Hachimitsu tripped and face-planted right into the ground. All the other racers zoomed past her, but she wasn't done yet. She got back up, ignoring the fact that her knee was probably going to need a bandage and a miracle. She kept running like a trooper until she passed the baton to Izumi. Izumi took off like a sloth on vacation. He was determined to at least catch up to the last person. But just as he was about to pass the last runner, his stroke of bad luck hit. His shoe flew off like a rocket, and Izumi, being the genius he is, kicked off the other one too. At this point, I don't even think he was running anymore. He was just stumbling forward, hoping not to face-plant in front of everyone. But miraculously, Izumi closed the gap just a little. He looked up and saw Shikimori in the distance. For a split second, he thought maybe, just maybe, she was the only one who could save them. And boy, did she deliver. Shikimori came out of nowhere and shot into second place like she was in a race car. It was almost like watching a professional athlete carry a bunch of amateurs. Inuzuka finished it off, running straight into first place. Shikimori was out with her older brother again, and she wasn't having any of it. She grumbled, annoyed that he was tagging along like some unwanted luggage, but he just laughed and teased her about it. Classic Fuji, always poking fun at her. She just rolled her eyes and moved on. They made their way to the clothing store, and Fuji, the ultimate nuisance, told her to call him when she was done. Inside, Shikimori was stuck in a mental battle over what to buy. It felt like an eternity since she'd had a proper date with Izumi, and now she was second-guessing everything. She remembered how Izumi had brought up the other day that it had been forever since it was just the two of them. That made her want to make the date special, but nothing in the store seemed right. She was practically frozen in indecision. Even the stupid commercial for the amusement park didn't motivate her enough. When she finally came out of the store, there was Fuji again, acting like a helpless puppy surrounded by two girls who were trying to flirt with him. The poor guy was too shy to move, practically glued to the ground. Shikimori, not having any patience for her brother's pitiful act, marched over and dragged him away, leaving the girls staring after them. She couldn't help but tease him a little. Fuji just sulked in silence, which was classic for him. As they walked, Shikimori had a flashback to when she was younger. Back then, she had zero personality. She was always following her brother or her mom around like a shadow. Heck, she even joined the karate club because Fuji did, and she was pretty good at it too. So good, in fact, that she chased off a group of bullies who were bothering a classmate. But even then, she felt like nobody, just another face in the crowd. Then one day, Fuji told her to stop following him and figure out what she wanted to do. That's when Shikimori had her moment of self-discovery. After some soul-searching, she realized that she wanted to be a cute girl. For the first time in her life, she actually cared about how she looked. Her clothes, her hair, it all mattered. Now, who knew that a random manga given to her by a classmate would change her life? It wasn't long before she met Izumi. On the day of her high school entrance exam, Shikimori bumped into him, and he was acting like the biggest disaster ever. His exam ticket stuck in a tree. Of course, she offered to help, but Izumi, being the awkward idiot he is, refused because he didn't want her to get hurt. Classic Izumi, always acting like a big unmatched coward. But Shikimori wasn't having any of it. She climbed that tree like she was some sort of ninja, and got his ticket down, then quickly left because, well, she was embarrassed. The next day at school, Izumi spotted her and ran to thank her. That's when Shikimori got all flustered and asked his name. And that, folks, is how everything started. Fast forward to now, and Shikimori realized all her worries about her date with Izumi were all in her head. Izumi loved both her cool side and her cute side. He didn't need her to be perfect, just herself. It was then that she knew she was ready for the date, no matter how many shoes she had to kick off along the way. When she got home, she finally made up her mind about what to wear. But then, as if on cue, she found the lip gloss she had been eyeing for ages, but couldn't afford. There it was, sitting on the table with a note from Fuji that read, "Good luck." Fuji, of all people, had bought it for her. Sure, he was a pain, but maybe he wasn't entirely useless after all. Shikimori smiled, feeling more confident than ever as she got ready for her date with Izumi. Izumi and Shikimori were finally going on a date, and it was supposed to be special. They hadn't had time together in ages, and this time they even got to stay out late. But of course, nothing goes smoothly when Izumi is involved. They arrived at the first exhibit only to find a 90-minute wait. Great, just what they needed. While standing in line, Izumi, bless his heart, decided to open his mouth. He told Shikimori that he wanted to see all sides of her personality. Wow, how deep, Izumi. Then he asked her if she had a dream. Shikimori, probably trying to be nice, told him about how she wanted to experience true love and surprise. It already came true because she was with him. Izumi looked like a confused puppy, which isn't surprising. The 90 minutes went by faster than expected, probably because Shikimori was too busy carrying the conversation, while Izumi was just standing there, probably trying to remember his own name. Finally, they got into the exhibit, and the ride was slow. The only thing slower was Izumi's brain. There were lovely smells and music, which Shikimori enjoyed, but Izumi? Nah, he fell asleep halfway through. Classic. Shikimori, not one to let an opportunity go to waste, tried to steal a kiss. Just as she was leaning in, bam, she had to pull back because someone, Izumi, snored his way through the perfect moment. At least he was consistent with being useless. After that art catastrophe, Izumi suggested going to another exhibit with a shorter wait, but Shikimori, feeling generous and probably pitying the guy, grabbed his hand and said she'd wait as long as it took, as long as they were together. Izumi, looking like a confused puppy, just followed along like a loyal but dumb dog. They hopped from one ride to the next, actually having fun. As the night went on, Izumi decided to take Shikimori to a restaurant he had booked ahead of time. Of course, the reservation was given away to someone else. Izumi's bad luck strikes again, like clockwork. Shikimori didn't seem too bothered, though. They ended up at another restaurant and, shocker, they actually had a good time. Maybe Izumi wasn't a total disaster after all, but it was a close call. Walking out of the restaurant, Izumi asked Shikimori what she wanted to do next. She said she wanted to do what was in the commercial. Izumi, with his unmatched brain power, didn't get it. So they ended up looking for a place where they could just talk and be alone, probably so Izumi could catch up on his sleep. They rented a gondola, and once they were on the water, Izumi started to get nervous. He had no idea what Shikimori was really after. The poor guy tried to change the mood by taking a picture. Big surprise, a power outage. Izumi, of course, thought his bad luck had ruined everything. Shikimori, being the saint she is, kissed his hand gently and told him they were finally alone together. Yeah, that's how bad Izumi is. He thought a power outage was his fault. Then Shikimori said it felt like a dream, where she was the only thing Izumi focused on. Izumi, the genius, finally clicked, and in the most awkward yet sweet moment ever, kissed her on the cheek. Wow, Izumi, a kiss on the cheek. So impressive. But at least he got one thing right. He told her he loved her and that she didn't have to worry about him leaving. Well, that's one decent thing from the guy. Shikimori hugged him tightly, probably because she couldn't believe this was actually happening. She said she was happier than any dream, probably because dreams didn't involve Izumi's brain being stuck in neutral for half the time. The next day, Shikimori told the girls about the date. Of course, Neko and Hachimitsu thought Izumi could have done better than just a kiss on the cheek. But who cares? As long as Shikimori was happy, that's what mattered. And honestly, after surviving a date with Izumi, she deserved to be happy. The bar was low, but somehow Izumi managed to trip over it and still get a kiss on the cheek. What a miracle. That's all for this anime. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and that bell button before you leave. And hey, what do you think about Shikimori? I think she's a trained ninja. Tell me who or what you think she truly is in the comments.